In this video, we're going to explore abandoned places along Route 66 in 8 states. Only one of these spots are not easy to reach, and all of them can be photographed from public spots. There is so much joy in cruising this amazing highway, and I hope this video will add some value to your next trip. I did skip major cities like LA, Chicago, and St. Louis due to traffic and safety concerns. Arizona and New Mexico were my favorite, but we'll start in California, which only has a handful of spots, but the journey through the desert was priceless. So let's begin. The first stop is the abandoned rail car near the Mormon Rocks in the Cajon Pass. This is the only spot on this list that is not easy to visit, but this abandoned rail car is pretty cool. I'm not sure why it's here, but I assume it's because of a derailment. There's a whole bunch of trains that pass through here every day. I think there's 3 different rail lines. You'll have to drive down a dirt road about a mile or 2. And if it just rained or snowed, I wouldn't come here at all. It's also a great place for night photography. The next town is Daggett. It's located just east of Barstow, California. This town was formed in 1883, and at one point this was considered to be a very big town. That building on the right used to be a hotel. And this is Daggett's garage. It was my favorite building in the town. It is now off limits to the public, but you could shoot it right from the road. The next stop is Ludlow, California. This town was founded in 1883, and for years it was a very important town for the railroad. Right along the main drag, you're going to see a whole bunch of abandoned buildings, including gas station, cafe, and a couple of homes. By the 40s and through the 60s, this town was really important for visitors along Route 66 as it had all the services. But then in the 60s, I-40 bypassed this town, and it quickly became a ghost town. This is the old residence for a motel and campground that used to be here. It also hosted the office. And on the other side of town by the railroad tracks is the old mercantile building. It's in very bad shape now, so it's fenced off. There's still a gas station, cafe, and a motel in this town, serving Route 66 travelers. Our next stop is Siberia, California. This town was a stop along Route 66 until 1973, when the interstate bypassed this entire area. This is all that's left of the town. It's a crumbling old building, but it's really cool, and its artwork is stunning. There are a few more foundations around town that you can explore as well. I really enjoy this part of the Mojave Desert. And on the other side of the highway, there's a few more foundations as well. The next stop is one of the most popular places on all of Route 66, Amboy, California. This town was founded in 1883 and was a really popular stop for Route 66 travelers until 1973 when they opened Interstate 40 north of here and traffic to this town declined. This is the old motel. It hasn't been used in decades. What's really fun is that the doors are open and you can go inside and explore. The gas station itself is still open and it's a great gift shop. They renovated the place in 2008. The Amboy School was closed in 1999 when the last students moved away. This was also the most expensive gas I ever paid for. Roy's Motel and Cafe is an iconic spot along Route 66. It's a great place to shoot, and if you happen to be here in the evening, the neon signs do get turned on. And a little further away is the old church. This also looks like they used to have a residence for the staff. At its peak, about 60 people lived in this town. Now only 4 to 10 people remain, depending on which source you read. Just a few miles away from Amboy, a large portion of Route 66 has been closed for a long time now. I'm not sure when or if this section will be reopened, but hopefully before 2026 for the 100th anniversary. The next town is Goffs, California. This was only briefly on Route 66 until 1931, but it is one of the more popular and famous spots along the highway. There isn't that much left in town, but there's this amazing open-air museum where the old school used to be. There's a lot of relics from the past, including some mining and military equipment from operations in the area. I spent about an hour here exploring all the buildings. It's quite fascinating. It seemed like there was a wedding today, so I didn't get to spend as much time as I wish I would have. And they do have rattlesnakes around here, so be careful. Needles, California is the last big town before we get to Arizona. This is where I got my fuel, food, and spent the night. Our first town in Arizona is Oatman. This town became a gold rush town in 1915. It once had 3,500 residents. Now there's only 43. The town was kept alive for many years by the fact that it was on Route 66. But it got bypassed in the 50s, and the town quickly died. The town still survives as a Route 66 stop. And they've given this town a really cool Wild West feel. There's all sorts of Wild West attractions here, including a mine. And I couldn't believe that there's just donkeys walking around town. And it had this really sweet old hotel. It's really nice that they took this ghost town and turned it into a really nice attraction. Our next stop is a Sights Grieve Pass. This is one of the most amazing highways you're going to drive on, but it's also very narrow and very dangerous. If you have an RV or a trailer, I don't recommend you drive this road, as this driver from decades ago has found out. You'll see this highway on the road between Kingman and Oatman. The next stop is Cool Springs, Arizona. This gas station was built in the 20s and then abandoned in the 60s. In 2001, someone bought the property and completely restored it. Now it's a really popular gift shop on Route 66. And there's the mayor. It's located between Oatman and Kingman. While I was visiting, the place was closed, but I still got to walk around and check out all the displays. It's also just a really pretty area. Hopefully one day I'll get to come back and visit when the place is open. The next stop is Antares, Arizona. It's also the site of the Giganticus Hedicus. The place was closed while I got here, but I got to look at all these really neat old vehicles. There's also a store and a motel here. One theme about Arizona that you're going to find, every place is in a really pretty area. That's why Arizona is my favorite part of Route 66. And that's the Hedicus right there. I'm not sure what that thing is. Our next stop is Hackberry, Arizona. This town is located between Kingman and Seligman. This town was stranded when they built a new highway south of here. It never really was more than a grocery store and some gas stations. And they lasted until 1978. It's a really interesting place to visit because they've saved a lot of cars, trucks, appliances, and signs from the past and turned it into a sort of outdoor museum. Oh, and here's the mayor. It wasn't open while I was here, and I'm not even sure if it's ever opened. But somebody definitely takes care of this place, and they do an amazing job. The next stop is Valentine, Arizona. Most of this town is off limits behind a fence, but you can still enjoy all the buildings from the highway. Someone has restored this gas station and parked a couple vehicles out front. I really enjoy the sign. And there's another one right next door. I'm pretty sure this is a Route 66 attraction and that it may be open during the summer months. But look at that car. It's so dreamy. And in the background, there's a few more buildings. I'll try coming here in the summer to see if it's open. And right across the highway is Bert's Country Dancing. The next town is Seligman, Arizona. This is one of my favorite towns along Route 66. It's located between Flagstaff and Kingman. This town has done a great job of preserving the history of Route 66. There isn't a lot of abandoned buildings here, but there's plenty of restored and vintage gift shops and restaurants. Like there's a lot of them. You can spend an hour or two here walking down Main Street checking out all these amazing places. But if you do come to Seligman, make sure you don't speed. There's also plenty of services here, including motels. Twin Arrows is a ghost town between Flagstaff and Winslow. There used to be 2 Arrows here, but one of them fell down. This trading post was created in the late 1940s, but unfortunately, it was abandoned in 1995 due to low traffic. It's a great place to explore, and as you can see, it's very popular with graffiti artists. This was the old cafe, and it still has some of the equipment inside. And this was the old trading store. I'm not sure what that was, but that was creepy. And of course, there was a gas station here as well, and it's long gone. But you can still see the garage. The next stop is Two Guns, Arizona. This may be one of the more fascinating places along Route 66. The town pretty much began in 1922 when they built a gas station on the location. And not long after that, they opened a zoo and some more businesses. This is one of the gas stations that were built in the 60s. Also in the 60s, they built this motel. The only thing that's left is this pool. And I guess the change room for the pool is still there too. There used to be some taverns and other businesses here, but they have all been gone. In 1971, they rebuilt the highway that bypassed the town. And the town has been dying ever since to the point where there's nobody left. This bridge was built in 1938 for Route 66. Another cool thing about this town is that it used to have a zoo. All these stone buildings were part of the zoo built after 1925. The owner of the zoo was actually mauled by one of his mountain lions. He did survive. This looks like the Flintstones. The zoo pretty much lasted till the 50s, then a lot of it was relocated to where the motel was. Two Guns was a very popular place along Route 66 during its heyday. Native artifacts here go back to the year 1050. This looks like it was the outhouse. And there's a cage for one of the animals. I can't believe it's still here and intact. And this is where it happened. The Apache Death Cave. Some Apaches had hidden in the cave to avoid detection from the Navajo. When the Navajo discovered this, they burned some sagebrush to try to force the Apaches to escape. And once they did, that's where they killed them. 42 people died here. The buildings that you see on site had nothing to do with the Apache Death Cave. They were part of the zoo. The zoo offered tours of the Apache Death Cave, and it looks like the cave has now been blocked, so no one can go in there anymore. Our next stop is Meteor City. It was never a town, but rather it operated as a trading post. It opened in 1938 and also had a service station. A few years ago, a couple people bought this place hoping to restore it. I'm not sure how the restoration is going right now, but it does not look like it's open. Hopefully, it will be ready in time for the 100th anniversary in 2026. Our next stop is Fort Courage. This place is amazing. It was a trading post, but it was also a replica of the fort built on a 60s TV show called F Troop. There was a grocery store, gift shop, gas station, all on location. Nobody really seems to know when it opened, but it looks like it opened in about 1967. And just as importantly, nobody even seems to know when it closed. If you happen to know when this place was shut down, please let me know in the comment section below. And right now, this place is listed as being for sale. And the last stop in Arizona is Lupton. This is right along the border with New Mexico. And it looks like it too was a trading post. There's a lot of these abandoned gift stores here, and a gas station. But it's also abandoned in one of the more beautiful spots along Route 66. This place was probably really popular before they built the interstate. But like a lot of towns, most places started to lose business. It sure is pretty here. And on the other side of the highway is this old abandoned gas station. It looks like whatever this was has recently burnt down. It is probably a restaurant or a cafe. So now we'll begin our journey into New Mexico. Our first stop in New Mexico is Thoreau. I came across this old gas station, cafe, and possibly a campground or motel. It's been abandoned for a long time and it's in really bad shape. Most of it has collapsed now as well. That must have been a pretty big restaurant. I came back on a different day, as you can see. I couldn't believe it was snowing in Thoreau and nowhere else. But this is a market in Delhi. It's also right off I-40. It's not in town. It looks like this is probably the bar. Yeah, that's a lot of snow. You drive 20 miles down the road, and it was a lot warmer, and there was no snow at all. Our next stop is San Fidel, New Mexico. 2 miles east of town, there's this really amazing Whitting Brother gas station. It's gloriously abandoned. And it looks like the roof is caving in now. And across the street is the beautiful sign. So it looks like it was a grocery store, gas station, and a motel. The motel is long gone. And that's where the gas station is in the background. And in town, there's a few more abandoned buildings. This looks like it used to be a garage of some sort. I really like the angels with the trumpets on the front of the church. And they had a drive-up liquor store. And it looks like it was also a bar as well. And right next door is a former trading post. It was probably a gas station at one point as well. The next town is Budville, New Mexico. This town was named after a man whose nickname was Bud. It's not a very big town, but it has 2 bars, including this one. And here's the other bar called Dixie. I'm pretty sure in Budville they must have sold a lot of Bud Light. I'm not sure what year this bar closed, but it doesn't look like it's been abandoned very long. And here's the trading post. It was operated by Bud, the man who the town was named after. He opened this in 1927. However, in November 1967, a stranger entered the gas station and shot Bud Rice and an 82-year-old employee. $450 was stolen, and the man escaped the crime scene. Almost a year later, the murderer was identified as Billy Ray White, and he was arrested and put on trial. But due to lack of evidence, he was later acquitted. To this day, the crime is considered to be unsolved. Our next stop is this abandoned trading post near Edgewood, New Mexico. I couldn't find any history about this place. I have no idea what this is, but it looks like an oven. But the old gas station and the trading post itself was pretty neat. This was a standard gas station. And they probably had a cafe here. Our next stop is Santa Rosa, New Mexico. This is definitely not a ghost town, but it has a whole bunch of really interesting abandoned buildings, including this old coffee shop. And it even has a payphone. And right along Main Street, there's a few more buildings. That one says Plymouth on the building, so it must have been a car dealership. And like most towns, there is a couple abandoned gas stations too. Last time I was here, there was a couple of motels that were abandoned, but now there's just one left. And it doesn't look like this one's going to be around much longer. Like a lot of towns on Route 66, when the interstate bypassed the town, a lot of businesses fell by the wayside, including this old restaurant. This is one of my favorite signs for a truck terminal. Yeah, it looks like it's been a long time this gas station's been abandoned. Our next stop is this abandoned gas station and motel. It's located off I-40, just a few miles east of Santa Rosa. I could not find any history about the place, but based on its condition, it's been abandoned for a long time. And it looks like it's endured decades of renovations. I'll put the GPS for this location in the description. This house is probably the residence for the person who ran this place. Wow, look at that. There's a well. Be careful of these things when you're exploring abandoned buildings. So this was probably the store and cafe. This is the front of the building. In fact, it may have actually been a gas station too. Here's the Standard Oil sign. And here's the old motel. It's crumbling really bad. Wow, and here's another well. Yeah, be very careful here. Don't want to fall in that. And this looks like it was the entrance to the motel. Our next stop is the ghost town of Cuervo, New Mexico. This town started in about 1901 because of the railroad. And it's one of those towns that died simply because I-40 was built and it killed off a lot of the traffic that used to come to town. This church is probably the most famous building here. But there is also a whole bunch of residents and other buildings, most of which are labeled "No Trespassing." This looks like it's an old railroad car converted into a house. There's also a couple vehicles scattered throughout the town. On the other side of I-40, there's even more abandoned buildings. Most of these were businesses, and all of them were marked "No Trespassing" as well. Our next stop is Newkirk, New Mexico. This is another one of those ghost towns that were created when Route 66 was replaced with the I-40 interstate. Used to have 4 gas stations. This one's my favorite, Wilkerson Station. And on the entrance to town is this old church. There's still a gas station that's in operation in town. And across the highway is another abandoned gas station. It looks like someone tried taking one of the gas pumps. Our next stop is Tucumcari, New Mexico. This is one of my favorite towns on the entire route. And it's usually where I spend the night. There's a lot of abandoned buildings here. When the interstate bypassed this town in the 80s, it was really hard on a lot of the businesses along old Route 66, including this great big restaurant. There was also this massive gas station. There had to have been about 15 to 20 pumps here. I'm not sure when this place closed down. If I was going to guess, I would say it was about the year 2000. It would have been very hard to keep these service stations open, especially if they were not located right along the interstate. There was just too much competition. Someone made a hole in the wall. And it's the bathroom. And just down the road is the old Paradise Cafe and Motel. This place closed in the mid-90s, but for decades it was a very popular motel along Route 66. Unfortunately, it looks like arsonists started a fire in the old motel. This would have been the office and residence for the people who ran the motel. Somehow there's a fridge suspended in the air. That's grim. And here's the old Tucumcari Inn. This place has only been closed down in the last decade, and it has an abandoned pool. Downtown has a lot of old abandoned buildings as well. Tucumcari is one of those towns you must visit when you're exploring Route 66. And in this video, I'm only showing you a fraction of all the stuff you can see here. Our next stop is San Juan, New Mexico. Interstate 40 bypassed this town in 1981, which caused most of these businesses along Route 66 to go out of business. There was a lot of gift shops and gas stations here. The town was founded in 1902. Then the railroad came through in 1904. But the railroad has been gone for a long time now. I'm not sure what building this is, but it looks like it was a lot of fun. And somehow the gas pump here has survived all these years. And it looks like this was the old co-op. It had a sticker on the door from 1994. Our final stop in New Mexico is the border town of Glen Rio. This town is in Texas and New Mexico. On the New Mexico side, there's only a couple of buildings left, including this one, and it's in really bad shape. And behind there's a car and another building. There used to be a motel and an abandoned bar on the New Mexico side. However, in the last year, it's been replaced with a brand new pot shop, just a few feet from the Texas border. And here's the border marker. So let's go check out and see what's left on the Texas side. So now we're in Glen Rio, Texas. This is one of my favorite ghost towns on all of Route 66. What made Glen Rio so interesting, because it was in two states, The bars were on the New Mexico side because Texas was a dry county. The gas stations were on the Texas side because gas taxes were lower. In the 70s, the interstate bypassed the town, so it died pretty quickly after that. By the 70s, it was a ghost town. This was the first motel in Texas, last motel in Texas. That's what it was called. And the train was removed in the 80s. And this old cafe has that really neat Art Deco style. Both of these places are on private property, but you can easily view them from the road. And when you get out onto the interstate, there's two more gas stations that are abandoned. Since the interstate didn't open till the 80s, these two didn't last very long. Oh, that graffiti's really cool. The next town is Adrian. It's the midpoint on Route 66. It's the same distance to LA as it is to Chicago. The cafe and motel were built in 1928. And back in its heyday, it operated 24 hours a day. And right down the road is this really neat abandoned gas station. It still has a couple of the pumps. But it's most famous for the bent door. That is kind of interesting. Part of the building is already collapsing. And it looks like this used to be a Phillips 66 station. Next up is Vega, Texas. I just like visiting this town. It's really cute. And the people here are very friendly. Route 66 used to pass through town, but it got bypassed as well. But the town survives because it's a county seat. The most famous building is this old gas station. They've restored it and turned it into a visitor center. But because I'm here in winter, it was closed. The town has embraced the Route 66 theme. The next stop is in a ghost town. It's the Cadillac Ranch. The site consists of 10 Cadillacs made between 1949 and 1963. It's sort of like an art project. And during the day, they even sell spray paint here, so you could buy some spray paint and add your own art. There was no cost to enter this place, but you did have to walk about a third of a mile to get here. Now we're going to stop into Amarillo, Texas, by far the biggest city in Texas on Route 66. Right on the edge of town, there's this old helium plant. At least that's what I think it was. It's all fenced off so you can't access it. But it is a really cool place. I wish I could get inside. Once you leave Amarillo, you can see the Leaning Tower of Britain. It was originally a real water tower, and it was slated for demolition, but someone bought it and turned it into this. It was an advertisement for a truck stop that is no longer here. It's right off the exit for Groom, Texas. Next town is Allen Reed, Texas. This is pretty much a real ghost town. There are some residents who still live here. And this old gas station and cafe was pretty much being taken over by the trees. One thing I found interesting about this town is it was originally named Gouge Eye in honor of a memorable saloon brawl, at least according to Wikipedia. That must have been some brawl to name a town after. This gas station across the street has been restored. Built in 1930. And it's right along the main Route 66 road going through town. And the town was bypassed when they built Interstate 40. The next town is McLean, Texas. A lot of people still live here. In 1984, this town was also bypassed by Interstate 40. One thing I found very interesting about this town is that in 1942, there was a prisoner of war camp built just outside of town. It housed about 3,000 German prisoners. All throughout town, you're going to see a whole bunch of abandoned buildings. And thankfully, this town saved and preserved this old Phillips 66 gas station. It's worth stopping into McLean, Texas just to see this place. They also have a really nice museum in town, but since I'm here in winter, it was closed. Next up is Leela, Texas. Not very many people live here at all. On the entrance of town, just off the interstate, there's an old abandoned gas station. It looks like it's been renovated. And in town, there's this old historic school building. I'm really glad they saved this. And they even have a swing set. Now we're going to Shamrock, Texas. Boy, I would sure like to live here. It's very similar to the town I live in Saskatchewan. It's got a museum with this old restored Magnolia gas station. About 1,700 people live here, so you can't call this a ghost town. It's actually really nice. One of the most impressive examples of Route 66 architecture is located right here in Shamrock. This might be one of the most famous buildings along the entire route. This old conical gas station. It was bought and donated to the town in 1999. And then they hired a firm to completely restore it to its original condition. Now it's a visitor center, gift shop, and the city's Chamber of Commerce. And at nighttime, it lights up. So that's all for Texas. Let's go check out Route 66 in Oklahoma. The first stop in Oklahoma is Texola. You're greeted by one of the best ghost towns in the whole state. This town had as many as 581 residents in 1930. And Main Street is full of abandoned buildings. Some early residents lived in both Texas and Oklahoma without ever moving. That's because they adjusted the border a few times, until settling on the current one. And the town also has this old jail, built in 1898. You could even go inside. Once you leave Texola, you're going to see the remnants of the most eerie, divided highway I have ever seen. And you can also see the original Route 66 as well. Our next stop is Eric, Oklahoma. The train came through here in 1902. The tracks are still up, but I don't think there's any more trains. This place is the highlight of the town. I do believe it's still open, but because I'm here in winter, it was closed. I like the Rosie's Diner sign. Once the interstate bypassed the town, most of the buildings on Main Street became abandoned. And it's also the hometown of Roger Miller. And they got this really trippy Sam's Park. They do camping and they rent rooms. It's like some kind of cool hippie place. The town was dotted with a whole bunch of motels, most of which have closed. This one still has the pool. Our next town is Clinton, Oklahoma. Definitely not a ghost town. The highlight here is the old Glancy Motel. It seems like it's going to be torn down soon. In fact, they may already be in the process of doing so. I did read somewhere that they were trying to save it. But it looks like the interior has already been gutted. But the amazing neon sign still survives. And it still has the pool out front. Our next town is Arcadia, Oklahoma. It's famous for the Red Barn. This was built in the late 1800s and restored in 1992. It is now a gift shop and museum, and it was pretty fun. They do ask for a donation. And right across the street there's a couple more abandoned buildings. This one was my favorite, and it turns out it's actually for sale as well. Our next stop is the Rock of Ages Conoco Station. It's been abandoned for a long time. It was built before Route 66, and it operated until sometime in the 1930s. This is all that remains. And it's just off Route 66, east of Arcadia. Now we're heading to Chandler. This is also a pretty big town. And as soon as you enter the town from the west, you're going to be greeted by this wonderful gas station. In 1897, a tornado destroyed most of this town, and it killed 14 people. I found this Phillips 66 gas station, and it was the day before Halloween. So it looks like they decorated it. But I also seem to have activated something that created a scary sound. And as you leave town, check out the bowling alley. They've got all these old signs right in the parking lot. The next town is Depew, Oklahoma. It's a very small town and was only briefly on Route 66. It has now been rerouted north of town, but it's got a lot of really neat buildings. This looks like the old bank. But this truck at the old gas station was my favorite. Next up is Bristol, Oklahoma. My favorite place here was the Chrysler Plymouth Tower. It's a 100-foot tower that hasn't been used since the 50s. Obviously it was for a Chrysler Plymouth car dealership. And then I went down by the railroad tracks to check out the old train station. It's now a museum. Our next stop is Chelsea, Oklahoma. Population about 2,000 people. This is the old bank building, and it looks like it's being restored right now. It's got nice new windows. It looks like the Food Mart is now the Historical Society. And here's the old bar. It looks like it's for lease. I wonder why they put up a sign for no skateboarding. Our next town is Afton, Oklahoma. Main Street on this town is just amazing. Tri-County TV was probably my favorite building. I'm not sure what it was, but I assume it sold TVs. And this building looks like it used to be the old bar and hotel. I thought it was the scene of a murder. That yellow tape is just a Halloween decoration. And here's the old grocery store. It's not hard to tell how long this place has been abandoned. You can tell how long it's been abandoned based on this sign, VCR rental. And on the edge of town is this really neat old abandoned motel. It looks ghostly. And now we'll go to Commerce, Oklahoma. The most popular place to visit in this town is the old Conoco gas station. It's built right into the side of this larger building. Gotta be one of the most unique gas stations I've ever come across. And right across the street is another restored gas station. I think this one is still open in summer months to serve Route 66 travelers. And the prices on the menu are pretty good. There are a couple of other buildings in town to check out, including Mickey Mantle's childhood home, who was from this area. This is also the town where Bonnie and Clyde and one of their associates killed Commerce Constable William Campbell and kidnapped the police chief. Our first stop in Kansas is Baxter Springs. It was established in 1858. This cottage-style service station is now the Kansas Route 66 Visitor Center. And along Main Street I found this old van and a former trading post. While I was here, I stopped in to check out the local museum. They have a really nice collection of stuff right in the yard. Our next stop is the Rainbow Bridge. This isn't abandoned, but it's located about 2 miles west of Riverton, Kansas, on the old Route 66. It's been recently painted and is now being paved as of December 2023. In which case, you should be able to drive across it again once it's complete. Our next stop is Galena, Kansas. This was founded in 1877. I first went to the park downtown to see the Will Rogers Memorial. And I got to see the old city jail. This gas station was built in about 1930. A few years ago, it was in bad shape, but now it has been restored, and they've done an amazing job. They even found a big boy burger man. On the other side of town, you could see even more. This is probably the most popular stop in town. This service station dates back to 1934. At one time, it was Little Service Station. And across the street from that is another former service station and garage. There's a few more abandoned buildings down Main Street. I didn't show them all. This town also has a museum where you can see the old train station and a Burlington Northern engine and caboose. Our next stop is Red Oak 2. It's a fake ghost town. There's an actual real town called Red Oak, Missouri. It's about 18 miles away. But then this artist came along named Lowell Davis. He grew up in Red Oak. When he discovered it was a ghost town, he created this place. And look at that, there's the mayor. All these buildings and vehicles are authentic. He's collected them from various places in the region. Although this gentleman passed away a few years ago, the park is still open to the public. They do, however, ask for a donation. I was here really early in the morning, and there was nobody else here except for the people who live here. And I gotta admit, it was way better and way bigger than I expected. I genuinely enjoyed my trip here. What surprised me is that I'd never even heard of this place until last summer. This has to be one of the most fabulous places along Route 66. You will have to leave Route 66 a couple miles to get here. Our next stop is Spencer Station, Missouri. When you're at Spencer Station, you're going to be able to see a couple miles of the original grade of Route 66. It's been here for about 100 years now. And in 1925, a gentleman named Sidney Casey purchased this property and built all of these buildings. Barber shop, there's a cafe, and a gas station. Eventually in the 60s it became abandoned. But a few years ago, someone bought the place. But while I was filming this video, he saw me on the security camera and invited me in to take a look. It's currently being renovated and it's looking really good. The place isn't ready yet, but it should be ready for next summer. Between the original road and these original buildings, this is one of the more authentic places along Route 66, and I highly recommend checking it out. Our next stop is this abandoned gas station and cafe along the feeder road of I-40. You may not notice this place if you're on I-40. The feeder road used to be Route 66. Based on how tall these trees are, I'd estimate it's been a few decades this place has been abandoned. And I have no idea when it opened. It looks like people just use this place now to drop off garbage. And here's the old cafe. I found this place to be exceptionally creepy. Not just because of this weird shoe sitting here, but also by the fact someone decided to nail a rose to the front of the building. I have no idea why they would do that. There was also a residence behind this building that was probably used for the person who ran the gas station and cafe. And finally, there's this old abandoned motel at Gray Summit, Missouri. It used to also be the Garden Way Motel was here, but they just recently tore it down. But right across the parking lot is this old travel lodge. They've gutted it pretty good. And it's huge. A lot of motel rooms here. I'm not sure why they destroyed this building. It didn't seem like it was in that bad a shape. There is also the possibility someone bought it so they can completely renovate it, but I doubt it. I saw a picture of this place on Google Maps from 2018, when it was still in use. I could not find any information to find out when it opened or when it officially closed. Did I mention its place is huge? So that's it for Missouri. Like I mentioned before, I'm not going into St. Louis. I don't do big cities. The first stop in Illinois is the old Chain of Rock Bridge. It crosses from Missouri into Illinois. It now carries only walking and biking traffic over the river, and it's a couple miles long. This bridge was built privately as a toll bridge in 1929. Its most notable feature is the bend that occurs in the middle of the crossing, and the bridge was closed in 1970. The buildings that you see are water intakes. The next town is Mount Olive. The Salisbury service station is the highlight of this town, and it was located on the original Route 66. And it is still the oldest usable service station on the highway in Illinois. It was built in 1926, but it stopped pumping gas in 1991. The next stop is Lincoln, Illinois. We all know who this was named after. My favorite building here is the old movie theater right downtown. It looks like they may be doing some renovations. This town was settled in the 1830s, and it's the only town named for Abraham Lincoln before he was president. And right in the main square, there's a whole bunch of abandoned buildings. This one looks like it may have used to have been a bar. And this building's condemned. And on the edge of town near the highway, you're going to find the original Route 66. And there's yet another gas station here. This one's all done up really nice. They were doing construction, so I'm not sure if it's still open. And don't forget to stop and see Dead Man's Curve on Route 66. This was realigned in the 50s because traffic would move so fast when they came to this curve, it caused a lot of dangerous accidents. And 2 miles south of Pontiac is the Illinois State Police headquarters that's been abandoned since 2003. This was built along the original Route 66 in 1941. It is now a National Historic Building. And in the back of the building, you can see where the offices were. And this is probably where they brought the criminals in to do processing. They probably used this door right here. Our next stop is Odell, Illinois. They've restored this amazing Standard Oil gas station. These are my favorite kind of pumps. And look at that, there's a clean washroom. This town was formed in the 1850s. And it was along Route 66 until they rerouted it outside of town. And around back is this really nice 1953 Winnebago. But the highlight of this town is the old tunnel. There was so much traffic in this town that the people got together and built a pedestrian tunnel to go under Route 66. It was no longer needed, so in the 70s they filled it in. That must have been a lot of traffic passing through here to have that kind of safety concern. The next stop is Dwight, Illinois. The Dwight Historical Society has taken over this beautiful train station built in 1891 and was used until 2016. And when you enter town, you can see this 1930s gas station that has been restored. It was in use until 1999. It is now the Dwight Visitor Information Center. Unfortunately, it was closed while I was here, but I took a little peek inside. And I also got to witness one of those super fast Amtrak trains while I was here. The next stop is Gardner, Illinois. Here you can come visit this old 1906 jailhouse. I'm not sure when they stopped using it. But you can actually go inside and check out what it was like being in the pokey 100 years ago. Imagine having to spend a couple weeks in this place. And it was kind of nice they had a radio to listen to. They also built a replica of this old popular diner. The original one had burnt down a few years ago. Then they built this replica and furnished it so visitors can check it out. And our last stop is the Joliet Prison. This operated from 1858 until 2002. It even hosted some Civil War prisoners. It was considered to be a very tough prison to reside in. They have now renovated it and they offer tours. You'll have to check out their website to find out when they're available. I really hope you enjoyed this tour of Route 66. I had a lot of fun making it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section below. Thank you, everybody.